Good morning once again, and welcome to CLOG TV, where we are digesting the topic resetting the civil service. Our topic this morning is on upholding neutrality, anonymity, and permanence in the civil service of Ghana. Your host, as usual, is Cephas Dosu, and with me to digest this agenda is, on my immediate right, Professor Justice Bawale. He is the Professor of the Public Administration and Management and Dean of the University of Ghana. Prof, you're welcome.
Thank you, brother.
Also with us is an astute, retired public officer, Mr. Daniel Amamu, who currently serves as the Director of Administration at CLOG. Mr. Amamu, you are warmly welcome.
Thank you.
To set the ball rolling, it is said that professionalism of the civil service is a fundamental principle enshrined in Ghana's governance framework, ensuring that civil service staff remain neutral, anonymous, and permanent, as it was in the case of the Civil and Local Government Service Staff Association versus the Attorney General and the Office of the Head of the Civil Service and the Office of the Local Government Service in 2017. When we talk about interference, since we have a prof from academia, what does interference means? And if you could also add how a political interference, could mean to our understanding.
Thank you very much. So I'm excited that we're discussing this because I think this is about the second time I've been involved in this conversation. And it comes up often when there's change of. These are conversations that I think we should continue to have in the way that allows us to build a cadre of civil servants who would be available to serve the public interest. Typically when we say political interference, what we're talking about is that the political class of a country begins to pull out, or if you like, overtures into getting involved in civil service affairs. This conversation of the political class and the civil service has political theory behind it. Many academics believe that the role of the politician and the role of the civil servant are different. And therefore, it is important that each of them is allowed to stay and to work in the way that allows them to do what they are meant to do. So the conversation around a politician or political interest wanting to make overtures into the civil service and to begin to dictate, in some cases, what happens there is what we will typically refer to as politicization or political interference of the civil service. So we typically say either politicization of the civil service or political interference in the civil service. That often comes in a number of ways. It's either that we are getting political actors appointing people who are politically known, people whose political alliances are known into civil service positions, or getting them transferred, and you know that appointment and transfers of civil servants are guided by the civil service ethos. And so when we see politicians appointing people into civil service positions, which should normally have been occupied through the processes of promotion and transfers by the civil service architecture itself, then we say there's interference. It also includes sometimes influences on the kind of thoughts and behaviors of a civil service. So, for example, when political parties insist that policies be implemented in certain ways against the practices established by the civil service. And I'm sure that anybody who has followed the civil service will typically know what the civil service will call the general orders, how things are done here, as against what the politicians want things to be. That would also constitute political interference. In fact, in recent times, a number of things have also happened that have shown that this could constitute political interference. For example, the processes of procurement could actually get tempered with politicians.
A politician?
Yes.
And they have an agenda and a mandate to deliver.
Yes.
And would want to find ways of meeting their objectives.
Yes.
So if they, by doing so, try to put in people who can execute the objectives, is it wrong?
So there are a number of very problematic circumstances that arise when that happens, and I will give you a few of those. As I said, civil servants are supposed to enjoy permanence. In other words, I enter because, okay, let me start it this way. Civil servants are appointed into office based on expertise, based on knowledge. And in many cases, you go through a process to get selected. When you get selected, you are posted to a place where your expertise is needed for serving the public's interest. Now, when that process is not followed, what is likely to happen is that political actors bring in people, and like you said, oh, but I want to serve the people. I find Mr. Dosu as a great guy. Let me put him there. Now, you know that political parties do not trust themselves. So once you bring that tainted as having been brought, quote unquote, by one political party, you become immediately a suspect when governments change. So the conversation around keep the civil service away from direct political interference is in itself first and foremost to protect the particular civil servants or civil service. And number two, to ensure that the civil service can keep its experience within the civil service system and to use them as and when due. Now, when you subject yourself as a civil servant to political alienation and affiliation, and you become known, what you immediately put yourself up is that when there's a new government, that new government will typically suspect you, especially in developing countries. In fact, in recent times, you have heard what has happened in the US, where Trump, for example, suspects literally every civil servant, every public servant, not even civil service alone, and is rampaging and transferring and dismissing people. Now, when that happens, the civil service suffers its knowledge base, its ability to keep policy continuity, its ability to serve the interests of the public. And if the politician is actually connected or committed to serving the public interest, then there's no way that you are going to be removing people and bringing in people just because you think you want to serve. Because the people who are in civil service are actually tried and tested people. And especially in countries like Ghana, there's no want of space in political, in other political areas that can appoint hundreds of thousands of people into political positions. And they do so all the time. What I think we should not do is not to allow them, politicians, to now take over the positions that are also typical civil service positions.
Thank you. Mr. Mamu, Prof has actively touched on the relevance of permanence, the experience and the knowledge it brings to bear on performance. But then it is also said that when you leave a person within a particular environment for quite a long time, motivation sometimes is also undermined. I don't know how you can address the issue of permanence and its impact on activity.
Okay, the permanence, which is stressed here, it's not that you're putting water in a bottle and leaving it. The fact is that the permanence is for the institution, not the person. You see, the institution should remain and assist all forms of government. I think this came out yesterday clearly. So in order that you will have that permanence, certain type of people must be employed. Let's take, for instance, what happened and what has brought us here. There were people who were brought into the civil service. As the discussion goes on, we might delve into detail. The people who joined the service and were not civil servants, interestingly, they were made to superintend on the people who should be there. There were instances where a chief director was posted to a ministry, and the minister said, I've got my own chief director, so I can't work with the one who has been posted from this office of the head of civil service. Now, with time, this person who replaced the civil servant, they are the people who are given the opportunity to travel. They are the people who are given the opportunity to serve on boards and so on. Now, these people have not been trained in the way civil servants work. Right. So they will travel and not prepare reports. They will attend board meetings, and you cannot trace what is happening with what they have gained by attending such. And then the civil servant who has worked through the system and is expected or is expecting to reach the top, because that's the motivation, is frustrated.
Okay.
So permanence, as it is that the institution should have its trail over a long period so that it will be in a position to serve various governments.
Okay, so in that sense, where the argument about the authority of the president to appoint has in various ways been espoused, how do we juxtapose that on the ingredients that we have mentioned, that in appointing the persons, should the president take into consideration how anonymous the person is, whether we're going to ensure that permanence and continuity and all the issues that, how is that factored in the appointment? And are we saying that, for instance, the recent issue at the Best and Less Registry did not take into consideration these ingredients you've mentioned, and that is why we have this rancor?
Okay. The NAP that you have mentioned, neutrality,
anonymity,
and permanence. That's the NAP. The neutrality, which is there, it's not that, oh, I was an NDC activist, but when I saw that things were not, I just resigned. That is your idea. The permanence that was espoused in the Supreme Court ruling refers to public perception. And public perception has nothing to do with you or your ideas. And as Prof has just mentioned, once you are seen in his explanation of interference, once you are seen in the light of a particular political party, you are colored. So the idea that people are saying this and that is not there. There is a misconception that every public office is civil service. Yesterday, the lawyer explained that before then, yes, the British colonial masters, if you are working in any administrative or any other position other than the armed forces, you are a civil servant. But we have, over the years, several institutions have been carved out. The latest, 2020, the government carved out TVET service. Okay? So if you look and read Article 190 properly, so the civil service...
Let me take you to the Article 195 that we are discussing now. That has to do with the authority of the president to appoint. Because my question has to do with how does that appointment found its foundation in the NAP. But then there's a caveat here that says that subject to the provisions of this constitution, the power to appoint persons to hold or to act in an office in the public services shall vest in the president, acting in accordance with the advice of the governing council of the service concerned, even in consultation with the Public Services Commission. So you realize that even though the NAP was not mentioned in the Constitution, there were two, clauses or conditions that must be met. One is that it should be in accordance with the council, and two, in consultation with the Public Services Commission.
Yes.
Now, if you look at the case study in question, could you say that these two conditions have been met? Maybe Prof can come in.
Please.
Okay.
You see, currently, out there, if you listen, somebody was even saying that CLOG sat back when a known political activist was sent to Electoral Commission. CLOG sat back in other institutions where politically known people have been put in places and CLOG are working on. Why are they now making noise? This is a misconception of Article 190. And Article 190, if you go there, you say the public services of Ghana shall include. So whilst the civil service is a public service, the parliamentary service is a public service, the police service, fire service, and all the services that are mentioned, and those that have been created since 1993. These are all public services. But we have the civil and local government service, which acts as government machinery. And that is what we are dealing with. And that those that serve as part of government machinery must be permanent, must all be what? Neutral. And then animals. Okay. How will it be if I am a worker in the civil service and then a contract, somebody applies for a contract and then the paper is put before me, then I go and see the contractor. You see, Chief, your paper is in front of me. Is that how we should? And when we are talking of anonymity, that is where it is. And when we are talking of you being politically covered, if that contractor comes to the ministry and sees me, I was a what constituency chairman of the party in power. Now he sees me as the chief director or something in the ministry. Will be comfortable. The service that we should render must be rendered in a manner that is not discriminatory.
Okay, thank you. Prof.
Yes.
See, let me clarify my question again.
No, so the question you ask, so I understood the question, and the no one disputes the powers of the president to appoint. But you see, the president and all president here, I mean, must always act according to what the Constitution says they should do, because it is the Constitution that is conferring the power, the executive power, on the president. And that same the document that confers the power says, if you have to do this, these are the conditions under which you do so. So you would find out that the Public Services Commission is Public Services Commission. So it superintends, in terms of the HR function, it superintends all the public services as alluded to by my big brother. So then, when the president has to appoint people to public services positions, there are rules that you follow. When it comes to the civil service positions, there are also rules that you follow. In the end, all appointments are made on and behalf of the president. But it's not all of those appointments that the president directly makes.
Okay.
Now, the civil service rules are such that, so you would find out that at certain levels of appointment, the interview processes are done by the Public Services Commission. And then somebody would sign a letter on behalf of the president to appoint you. These we call delegated authority. When it comes to the real civil service positions, the issue about you should appoint on the advice and in consultation are very, very important. What we are talking about is not appointing people into other public services, and thank you for clarifying that. There are several public services, but the civil service, which is part of the public services, has a special character. And the character it has, I am a public servant because I work for a public university, but I'm not a civil servant. So when I behave, my behavior will be different from you who is a civil servant. Why? Because on a daily basis, you are working with a politician to administer policies for the country. When that politician comes in, because of the troubles of, if I come as president, I want to wipe away everyone and bring in a new set of people, and they will have no clue what happened yesterday before I won election, and therefore we would not be able to have a continuing government, or if you like, state. The framers of our constitution, and based on practices that we have borrowed from the West, it says keep a group of people who will serve as the repertoire and the embodiment of the state in terms of the knowledge, the practices, the records, everything. So that when the new president comes, those people are there to work with. So the minister comes and there's a chief director, there's a director of HR, there's a director of that, there's a director of this. And those people immediately will bring the politician into the system and orient them on what is being happening. The truth is that politicians are appointed based on expertise or competence. They are appointed based on how loud you can shout. So you would get someone who has no degree whatsoever, has not gone to study anything whatsoever. But because this is a party faithful, they get appointed. That is a political appointment. When that person comes into office, there has to be someone who understands how the civil service works. And the civil service ethos is for us to be able to serve the public without discrimination. Especially in our country where we have become so polarized, I think the civil service is one of the institutions we should keep safe, so that if I were a political exposed person, or I am aligned to any political party, and I was coming to look for service, I will be comfortable that I will meet a civil servant who would treat me irrespective of what political party I belong to. Prof, and that is important.
My producer is calling for us to go on break. Before we go on break,
yes,
you have rightfully touched on the responsibilities of oversight institutions like the Public Service Commission,
yes,
and Office of the Head of Civil Service,
yes,
in ensuring adherence to the protocols and filling vacancies within the public and the civil service institutions.
Yes.
What do you consider or perceive to be the challenges that they are confronted with, for which reason they are not able to ensure adherence?
I don't think they are. It's because they are not able. I think the political class is gradually pushing the boundaries, and I get a bit worried about that. So you would find, for example, that positions that hitherto used not to be directly appointed when governments change, once one political party makes a mistake and does it, and we don't fight to get it corrected, the next party comes and they do the same, and then they move one step further. So it is that which is gradually weakening the oversight responsibilities of Public Service Commission and Office of the Head of Civil Service. Typically, you should have gone through the ranks, you should have gone through the processes that are laid down. And it is for a reason. It is for a reason because that job you are going to do has a certain ethos. And the ethical ethos of the civil service is that if somebody was appearing before me, I would give that person attention irrespective of which political party they belong to, which ethnic group they belong to. And so when we talk about, for example, representative bureaucracy, we would typically talk about all of this and say it is important that the civil service remains neutral. And that neutrality, we are told, includes to the extent that you do not align openly with a political party. I mean, and I keep saying, I said this the last time, if you want to do politics, do politics. If you want to be civil servant, be civil servants. The politicians have their way of doing things. The civil service has its way of doing things. We expect that you, and listen, it is not for nothing that professional groups in this country and elsewhere do not accept anybody at all to just jump in. So I cannot start from here and walk to the law court with a gown and say, no, you can't do that. I cannot sit here right now and ask you, take off your shorts because I want to look at your private part. I can't do that. Why? Because I do not have the stamp of professionalism that the medical doctor has been trained with to be able to look at you. It is the same thing that the civil service is. That the civil service trains its people, takes them through processes, and gives them the competence they require to be able to treat all the people that appear before them in a certain way. And so when you become politically exposed, even if you are a civil servant, and you become politically exposed, you went to contest an election, you lost, we see you on political campaign platforms, or you are doing some other things, the civil service ethos says, stay away, so that we will have people who we can trust would give service to everybody, irrespective of where they are coming from. Prof,
thank you very much. I like this bit that you cannot just get up in the morning,
no,
wear a gown, wear a wig,
no,
and when the court and start practicing.
No.
Neither can you just put a stethoscope around your neck,
no,
and instruct people to take off their dresses.
And the president cannot legislate. Oh, Mr. Dosu, today I've appointed you as a medical doctor. Go to Kolebu and start treating people.
So in the same way, the civil service position must not be a position where somebody can from anywhere because of political allegiance or affiliation.
No, I don't think we should. We shouldn't do that
and put there.
Yes, we should.
Thank you very much. I think it's a good note point for. Could take a recess,
yes,
and take a short break. When we come back, we'll be looking at the NAP into detail and look at public perception about the neutrality, the permanency,
Anonymity.
Anonymity.
Yes.
And juxtapose that on whether that is the public perception about the civil service.
Yes.
Do the civil service think that the public
think that the civil
service is neutral, is anonymous, has the tendency of remaining permanent? Viewers, join us again when we come back for details into this angle of discussion. Thank you. Because on that.
Yeah, it's something which keeps coming. And as Prof noted, it's heightened during the change of government. In our case, the political interference, first we must note how it manifests. It starts with appointments from the presidency or by the president. That is what has occasioned this problem with the births and deaths. The next one is the I cannot work with you syndrome, which we talked about years and years ago and continued to hammer it. The ministers come into office and they come with a host of people surrounding them. They may be called personal assistants, technical assistants, or political apparatchiks who are given positions within the ministry. In the case of these technical assistants and so on, some of them are made to sit on desks of directors and even chief directors. That is the manifestation. Then when you go to the district assemblies, some of the DCEs also repeat it in different forms. As for this civil servant, he's not doing my own, so he should be transferred, he should be posted out of this place and so on. So the interference is coming from the presidency, from the ministries, and from the district assemblies. And these are things CLOG over the years has pointed out. And even after this Supreme Court ruling 2017 June, it's as if some of the authorities have not heard about these things.
Okay. I think that, and I'm happy at the some of the manifestations that you have actually spoken about. And you know, one of them leads to the other. If I have the luxury to be able to bring in people into civil service as a minister or even as a president, then I must find a reason to bring them. And one of the reasons is what you alluded to. So I can't work with you, Mr. Dosu. So I'm sorry, I can't work with you. I'll bring another person. All right. Now, the danger with that is that we get a very fast changing civil service. And when you get a very fast changing civil service, what happens is that you lose competence, you lose experience, you lose all of those attributes that comes with the experiences that people come with. I tell you what, many years ago in the US, the administrative state, people used to be appointed into the civil service based on what they call gentleman approach. You have to be from a certain background. You have to come from a dignified family. You are supposed to be coming from some royal family. And the understanding then was that these people are the nobles, and so they have a certain dignity and they care for the rest of society. But over time, it was realized shortly that these people didn't have the training, the competence, the expertise, the ethos that was required to function in public civil services. So the US went ahead and introduced and changed it and introduced what became known as the public service public personnel administration according to the merit system, which means that before you become or you enter the civil service,
you must meet certain standards.
You must meet minimum standards. And the reason why you must meet those minimum standards is so you can deliver your job in the way that satisfies the public. Over time, we messed that up because one president won election and said, well, my background and the people who supported me are not people who have educational qualifications. So if we have to appointing people based on competence and merit, it means that my people won't come in. And they introduce what we have copied, known as public personnel administration, according to the spoils, which says that once I win power, just like going to war, once I win a war, I appropriate the spoils of victory.
Yeah.
So we got that introduced, even in the US. But over time, some effort have been made to reverse to the public administration according to merit system.
Prof, there is this other angle. A politically exposed person,
Yes,
by virtue of his affiliation, is put into office when his party comes into office.
yes,
He may be in that office for about 4 years.
yes.
Within that period, he acquires some knowledge. Some kind of investment is made in him. Then at the end of the tenure of that government, he also goes with that, that political party. Have we begun to quantify the investment loss in these people who, by virtue of the fact that they go with the parties that come into office, they're still permanent? Have we been able, and the effect and impact on the states?
So if you have noticed, you would have found out that over time we have struggled as a people keep development on a progressive trajectory. Check all the sectors, roads, transport, whichever. You find out that we haven't been able to keep consistent policy. And the reason is that we change too frequently. And in fact, I get worried, and in fact, now I advise my very good students, I'm sorry, to go into public service. Because you cannot go into public service anymore and be sure that you will work and retire peacefully without a problem. And that if you got appointed by one government, the next government comes and almost immediately associates you with the party that exited. But that happens because of the nature by which people come in. So if you came in with by a particular fiat, presidential fiat, once that president, your power is diminished. The next person comes and says, go away. And you talked about the many years of experience that people have acquired. Policy formulation and implementation is not it's not a novice. It's not an. It's a very, very difficult thing. It is that which makes one country progress and the other
progress or become static.
So we cannot. And to be honest, all of us must accept that when it comes to the civil service that work with government, let's keep them there. Let people enter by expertise. And I tell you one thing which makes civil service permanence, neutrality, anonymity, all of that important. Because the concept of bureaucratic representation or we call it representative bureaucracy. Okay, I'm happy that I remember the term. Representative bureaucracy says that if you were to pick a sample of 100 civil servants at random, they should reflect the diversity of our society. In other words, if I came to the civil service and I randomly picked 100 civil servants, we should see people who believe in MPP, people who believe in NDC, people who come from Konkoma, who come from Konkoma land, people who come from Igbe land, people who come from Ashanti land, and all of that. In other words, entering that service should not be based on exactly who you are, but it should give diversity so that I can see that when I'm coming there, I can trust who I am, and the trust element is so crucial that I am applying for a scholarship, and I know that the officer who processed the document is going to do so based on his competence. He's not going to do so based on the fact that I come from the same country, town with him. He's not going to do that because one party appointed him. That level of expertise often come with people who are appointed directly to come into the process. Why? Because they haven't been taken through the civil service ethos of selflessness, competence, accountability, and all of that. And that's why we suffer. So the point we are making is very simple. Listen, if I were ever president, assuming I became president, say amen to that. If I become president,
maybe I'll get political appointments.
And you are my party person, and I want to give you a position, and there's no position. I'll get an entity and give you that position. I won't bring you to the civil service. That's all the point we are making.
That brings me to my next question. I think Mr. Mamu can help me. So, has government a role to play in ensuring that NAP becomes the bedrock of the civil service? Or what are the responsibilities or the roles of government in ensuring that the civil service is neutral, is anonymous, and permanent?
I think the government, when it comes to implementing some of these rules that affect the civil servant, they are very good at it. You cannot wear any of these political paraphernalia and think that you went to Makola or someplace and you come back and still remain in the service. The government has applied the rule perfectly through its agents. What they haven't applied is that when they see their own people violating the same principles which will sack me from the civil service, people implement, they are mute. They turn their eyes, or who cannot cry and I'm here no more. You see, as if it's power which must prevail.
But shouldn't that be a worry to us? So for example, I keep asking myself, we had an election not long ago. Everybody in the civil service voted.
Yeah.
Okay, so people would have voted for MPP, people would have voted for NDC. So for me, I keep asking myself the question, NDC won power, has come to office. Several people in civil service would have voted for NDC. If NDC was upholding the ethos of the civil service, it would be doing a lot of service to the people who even voted them to stay in power and to be at work.
But there's motivation for progression.
Because people can progress.
Okay, so in that light, having looked at the responsibility of government in ensuring that NAP is adhered to, what are the responsibilities of the institutions like the Public Services Commission, the head of Office of the Head of Civil Service, and the Labor Union CLOG, in ensuring that I think it was Mr. Mamu who said that, or you, who said government keep pushing. Once this action is taken and those resistance, then they add more to ensure that this becomes the full stop for the political interference.
So, you know, the difficulty that we have had as a country has been that once we get handed over power, we want to become omnipotent. So the power is overacting. And it's a bit worrying. And so many times, even these oversight institutions have found themselves wanting because the overtures actually also affects them. In some cases, you are careful because otherwise you'll be labeled as being against the government. So what I think the civil service, public services must do, these oversight institutions must do, is to keep the conversation going, even before elections are held. It's important that the conversation is and that conversation should include a consistent engagement with civil servants themselves. Like Mr. Amamu said, if you're a civil servant and you go and you have a Facebook page that has all the colors of MPP, and MPP loses power, people come after you. So, and that is why we talked about the anonymity thing. So civil servants must work and be only in the background. They don't have to be known. So the policy design, so as a policy, that's why, you see, the ethos of civil service is historical. You write that letter and you will sign your humble servant. And the politician takes the policy brief and goes to present it as his.
Yes.
And the reason he can do that is that he trusts that you will give him good advice.
Yeah.
But when you yourself get yourself identified and painted and you are out there shouting, then the tendency for the politician who has come to trust you and the efficiency of your advice will lead them to take action.
But I want you to go into the angle of the roles that institutions like CLOG,
yes,
and the members,
yes,
should or must play to ensure that anonymity, neutrality, and permanency is protected.
So one of the things that I'm happy that CLOG in this conversation, this is one of the things that we have to just have to keep talking to our people. Everybody votes. Keep it in your heart if you're a civil servant. You want to join political party, jump out and go there. And I've said that many times. That's one thing. So let CLOG keep the conversation. Number two, CLOG is a society that must advocate for its space. Because until that is done, that's why I asked the question. I mean, it doesn't matter how powerful you are as a president. You can't appoint a lawyer to say, hey, I've given you, go and, or you're a medical doctor, go and. You have to go through certain things. So CLOG must advocate and keep advocating. And I like the fact that CLOG went to court to test the law. So it's been done. Perhaps what CLOG should be doing a bit more is to have closed-door conversations with the powers that be. I like the fact that they will take the right to demonstrate, go on strike and all of that. But I think it doesn't make any impact. So I think CLOG, the head of civil service, head of local government service, should be engaging their governing councils and to be engaging the chief of staff and be engaging the presidency. So that this is made explicitly clear that as a country, we are not going to do much if we keep putting people who are politically exposed in administrative positions, in civil service positions, because that would actually jeopardize the ability of the service to remain in perpetuity, to keep its experience in perpetuity, and to be able to have policy coherence and to be able to properly advise politicians when they come into power.
Okay. Don't you think that government or the politicians also need to be abreast with the ethos, the conditions, and what have you of these institutions? For instance, if you read the Code of Conduct of the Local Government Service, it says that, the statement says that principles on anonymity and permanence are deeply enshrined. He said, officers and staff of the local government service shall serve the state with neutrality and anonymity in the national and local government processes.
Yes.
Then under permanence, he says the local government service is a constitutionally mandated public service institution and owes allegiance only to the state and community. The permanence of the local government service is integral to the achievement of the objectives of the local government service, local government authorities.
Yes.
And these are documents that are available to all and sundry, don't you think that the politicians must also align themselves with all these publications, especially with the Supreme Court ruling?
Yeah, so that's the point that I made about omnipresence of power. When you get power, and Lord Acton says power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So it's important that we keep having a conversation. I'm not too sure that it's possible to have this overturned one day. And oftentimes you would have seen, I'm sure that whoever was appointed to any position would have played a key role in there. Somebody would have gone to advocate and lobby and all of that. And sometimes you get these appointments happen. So yes, the politicians know these, but it's not like, it's not organic. Their compliance with these dictates will not grow automatically. Someone must enforce it. Somebody must advocate for it to happen. And so, for example, CLOG is bearing its teeth out to say, hey, you can't do this. If CLOG gets to attract the attention of the president, he may just reassign that individual to another place. That's all the good. And I'm not too sure what happened, because as I understand, this has happened before. So what was the outcome CLOG got? Did the politician cave in when CLOG made the demand to not go there and all of that? Now, if CLOG didn't succeed first and they don't succeed this time, get to know that position, because once governments change, this individual will stay there. The next government would yank the person off. But I'm just hoping that one day it will be that if this individual is yanked off because they don't belong to the civil service, then the politician would not replace them with another politician, but that they would ask the head of civil service, say, hey, head of civil service, do your thing. Go through the process. Make sure that one of the directors who is trying to rise through the ranks to become the registrar, or any of those people who are queued up, becomes. Because Mr. Mamu made a point. We have to have career pathways for civil servants. And if that is not too clear, and I cannot be sure that when I start as Assistant Director 2B, I'm going to rise through the ranks and get to the point, then I'll begin to clone allegiance for a political party, because that's the only way by which I can get to that position. And that would toxify the civil service, because then you're going to have NDC civil servants, MPP civil servants, and when governments change, the NDC civil servants will immediately become the bosses, and whether they have the experience or not, they would become the bosses and lead us. Don't forget that they are leading not the political party, they are leading the states.
The state.
And those of us citizens must have a certain level of confidence that if I'm appearing before a civil servant, that civil servant is going to treat me with the lens that I am a Ghanaian, I am citizen, and all of that. And that the perception that somebody would, and that perception thing is so important. If I came to you today and I didn't get good service, I should be able to attribute that to you. But I shouldn't be able to attribute that to you to say, oh, Mr. Dosu didn't give me because I am XYZ and Mr. Dosu is WWI. I shouldn't be able to do that. So that I can raise a complaint in the administrative system and report that I got bad service from a civil servant, and I think that his competence is compromised. And the process can take that up within the system and make sure that if there are sanctions, the individual is sanctioned. But if I raise a political complaint, oh, Mr. is not doing this to me because he's a political person this and I am a political person that. That's why he didn't treat it. That becomes very difficult to handle, even administratively. It is also the thing that has undermined discipline in the civil service.
So Prof, basically you have, if I could say, I could perfectly summarize what you have said. You have spoken about protecting career path.
Very important.
And so I can liken the career path to the Temamuto way.
Yes.
As it used to be.
Yes.
Then the political interference can be likened to the sudden development of unauthorized routes that enter the motorway.
Many accidents.
And cause many accidents. So if we don't protect the career paths and allow political interference, there could be accidents on the way. That could affect the nation.
There could be.
We'll come back again. Please stay tuned. Welcome back. Welcome back. As usual, this is Resetting Civil Service, and I'm here with Prof. and Mr. Amamu. We are digesting the public perception as far as NAP is concerned. NAP represents neutrality, anonymity, and permanency. I want to quote a portion of the Supreme Court's judgment, page 16, the second paragraph. It says that an effective civil service is essential to modern-day democratic society, and a measure of neutrality is necessary in order to preserve the effectiveness. No civil servant must owe or be seen to owe appointment or promotion to partisan activities, since visible partisanship by civil servants would severely, if not destroy, the public perception of neutrality. Mr. Mamu, how critical is public perception of a civil servant is, especially when whether the civil servant is perceived to be neutral or otherwise? How relevant or critical is this perception?
The civil servant does not serve a party in government. The civil servant serves the state. And in doing so, there are several provisions in the Constitution which tells you to do your work without discrimination. And without discrimination implies that you don't look into the face. You don't say, I go to church with this person. You don't say, I belong to this political party. You don't say, this is my brother, so things must be for him, and all that. So, if you are to do this, how will the person know that he can expect that type of service genuinely from you? It is only when he sees you to be neutral, not to belong to, or you are doing the service not because he's your classmate, he's your party mate, or whatever. So the neutrality principle is very crucial, and it is crucial for us to remind ourselves that our service is working directly with the government. Our service is producing this service to help the government rule the country by formulating policies, by implementing the policies. And if we are not neutral, or if we are not doing this type of work with a clean sheet, the public will have no trust in us.
Okay, so
I want to intervention.
Yeah, that's correct.
So the two of us, assuming the two of us compete for a position or a job or a contract or anything, okay, you are one party, I'm the other party. And Mr. Mamu is an individual who is been appointed. I know that Mr. Mamu belongs to the same party like you. And then you win the contract, or you get the job, or you get whatever it is that we are competing for. How many reasons will Mr. Mamu give to convince me that you want that contract, that job, on merit? How many reasons? So it is that which makes the issue of perception extremely crucial, that at all times, private citizens businesses should be able to appear before a civil servant and be convinced in their mind that they are going to be treated fairly, and that if they were competing or in competition with any other person for a particular service or favor or whatever it is that they were going to be getting, that they are losing out because they lost out. And if they win, they know they won on merit. And the rest of us who are around also know that they won on merit. It is the reason why in the universities, for example, you cannot teach and examine your own child. Because there's no amount of convincing you will tell anybody that your child got an A and that it is because your child is brilliant. So you see, so even when we trust ourselves, we will still say, well, wait, we know that there's conflict. And that is at the base of the issues of conflict of interest. What is the interest that you have? How is that interest in your decision making? And what it goes through the minds of the public when they come before you. That are the critical elements.
So in that sense, especially now knowing how weighty public perception is, let's just suppose that on the appointment of Samuel Adom Botry, who is alleged to be activist of the governing party, the NDC, and was once the district chief executive for Esikuma Odobin Brakwa District Assembly, and now occupying a civil service post. One, what injury would it cause to public perception? Two, what injury will cause to the aspirations and the motivations of the civil servants who are aspiring to rise into higher positions? And three, how will this appointment undermine the permanency and the continuity and anonymity of the service which he's been appointed to? Maybe I can start from Prof, then I can come to you, Mr. Mamu.
Yeah, so I when I talk about personalities, I am extremely careful, because people take years to build their reputation. So when it comes to mentioning names, I am extremely careful. So please pardon me that I am talking about this. And I will say some quick things. One, this could have been averted, for example, if this individual was appointed to another public service that was not a civil service position. This issue wouldn't have come up. Okay, so that's one thing that I want us to know. Talking about it, because the appointment was into a civil service position. So it's not about the individual
per se.
For his person.
It's about appointments.
Yes, and it's not even about the president's power to appoint.
Yeah.
It is the fact that the president has power to appoint, and he can appoint to any other place, but not into a civil service position directly as it's been done. So if the president were to alter his appointment to say, Mr. Siama or Udum, please move from this and go into another political position, this conversation would have ended. Now, and I say this because, as I say, I don't like to talk about people directly, because people take time to build their reputation, and overnight you get, tortured, literally. But to go directly to your question, his appointment, and I'm sure that the people who work in the birth and death registry and who had aspirations, especially people who have risen to almost that position and are near retirement. Now, if somebody has 4 years to go on retirement, and this officer stays in that office for 4 years, it means that this individual who could have become the registrar is not going to become the registrar. Now, that has several other implications. One, about their conditions of service. Their retirement benefits, and several other things, okay? And the pride of civil service, the pride that I've served my country, and my country recognizes my expertise, and therefore I've been given an unimpeded access to rise to become who it is that I want to be. And that is, it's innate to every individual. Every individual wants to be able to rise up. So that's the first thing. The second, so that's, and this single act has potential to actually send shock waves through the civil service system. And the shock waves are that, oh, so even if I spend 10 years, 20 years working for civil service, I may never get to become this. But if I'm supporting a political party, I could become. What that means is that we are going to have, over time, a lot of very competent people who would exit the civil service because they can't see their way out into the end. So people will not stay and give the service that we require. If you notice, it is the reason why the civil service has bled over a period. Why? Because the more politics creeps into civil service, the more competent people want to stay away, because then you have to either bootlick to get the position or you don't get at. That's the second thing you talked about in terms of the image of the institution and how people would perceive when they come before that. Reality is, if there was anyone who is also a politically exposed, let's even say a politically exposed person, private individual, when they have to go before this person, they have to gather a lot of confidence to be able to anticipate fairness from this person. Plus, what happens most of the time, when this person who is a politically exposed person goes into the position, you would find that if there were people in there who have contrary views to his views, these individuals, rather than being celebrated for bringing diversity to the table, often get labeled as being anti-government, anti-political party, and then the service begins to spiral down. These, I think, are worrying. And that's why this particular appointment, as you people talk about, as for me, I'm sitting in my university and I'm fine. But I think that for the sake of protecting the civil service, and I'm a public administration professor, part of our mandate is to help to build a civil service that we can all trust. So that if I were going to get service at a birth and death registry, it doesn't matter what political party I belong to, I can be sure that I'll get service. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. If you read page 17, the last sentence of the second paragraph of the judgment, let me quote. It says that visible partisanship and overt displays of lack of professional neutrality and objectivity would be a betrayal of the just expectations of the people of the Republic of Ghana and impair even further the efficiency and effectiveness of these key governance services. Juxtaposing this appointment on this decision or ruling of the Supreme Court, what is your thought on this?
Yeah, let's go a little back into history. Until the enactment of 1027 or the Births and Deaths Act 2020. What happened? All the heads of births and deaths were career civil servants. So what brought the change? They were making amendments to an existing law, and they came out with the law in 2020. This law was misrepresented, that because the Civil Service Act is there and they have come up with an act for births and deaths, these births and deaths is no longer a civil service institution. But a careful reading and a careful interpretation by lawyers and whoever, and as we speak, the births and deaths is under the office of the head of civil service and also under the office of the local government service.
Let me interject briefly to support your angle of conversation, right, before you go on, because you mentioned the Act 2020. That act is not about the births and death registry. The act is entitled Registration of Births and Deaths Act. So it is about their function, not as an institution. But then in part, they quoted the Article 195, which gives the president the vested authority to appoint. But then forgetting that those were also premised on certain conditions that in consultation with the PSC and in accordance with the councils.
I'm not even going there.
Okay.
Who appoints the head of civil service?
President.
So, and who appoints other heads? So this is just 195 is just telling you that the president has power to appoint all public servants. And if he's not in a position to do it, he relegates that power to other bodies. That is all. So what is there is not new. Same thing. You appoint the head of civil service. You appoint the head of, and even in the civil service, we have A class people who are appointed only by the president. And so whatever, just like what you read, in accordance with the councils and in consultation, the appointments are done. And it's the same as under the Births and Deaths Act. People were thinking that because there is this act on registration, it means that institution is no longer, that's a misconception. That is a misconception. And as we speak, they are still under the office of the head of civil service and office of the head of local government service. And their councils are the people who does everything. So it is this fact. So what we are talking is about things we have introduced just for the past 4 years, and which CLOG has drawn and continue to draw attention to it, that as it remains a civil service institution, go by the Supreme Court ruling. Don't let people who are known political activists be appointed into. As we speak now, you see, the problem the public must also appreciate is that when we as civil servants violate that principle,
we are sanctioned.
Immediately, the sanction is fast. And if that we are being eliminated for violating it, do you bring politically colored people into the service? If you are in it and you are colored, go away. But because of political power, then we can bring in people who are politically colored. In fact, there is some inconsistency.
And just to add quickly to the point that you made reference to, the reference of the president appointing also must be along with the rules that are established. So he said there are some categories of appointment and there are different processes that are applied to different categories categories of appointment. So in the end, if a civil servant has to go through the process and get appointed to become the registrar of birth and death, that individual would have also been appointed by the president, because the process that is laid out to appoint such an individual is actually a process for the president. So the president ends up, like he asked the question, head of civil service is appointed by the president, but there's a process that he goes through, and then the president appoints. The director, a chief director, is appointed by the president. The reason why that process is in place is to ensure that this individual owes allegiance to the state rather than the president directly. And one of the things that we have to be very careful about is that issue of I owe allegiance to a particular president because they appointed me. Because what it means is that once that individual exits, then you too will exit. Okay, so those are the conversations about the protections that are put in place. So the protections are put in place both for the citizens, to make sure that citizens are protected, and that if I'm coming to, and then also for the individuals, and to help us to be able to keep a service that lives forever, a service that will serve all of us. These are very, very important considerations.
So, Mr. Momo, I want to come back to you again. Having established the protocols we need to adhere to in making such appointments, in your opinion, would you say that the appointment of this registrar who is politically exposed goes to uphold the principles of NAP, that is neutrality, anonymity, and permanency?
In the first place, he cannot be perceived to be neutral. The public will not perceive him to be neutral. Anonymity, he can also pass that test because they know you and what you stand for. So that will also not pass that appointee. But let's come to permanence. If the old appointee was politically colored and has left, what have we gained as a state? The institutional memory
is gone with
that he had gathered is lost. The investment you have made, the various conferences he has attended, the experience he has gathered is gone. So, can we sincerely talk about permanence? If we continue from this path, or if we tread this path, what we are doing is that institutions in public service will become ad hoc institutions. And that is what CLOG is talking about, and would want the government to understand that you cannot have a civil service based on ad hoc decisions and practices. No. So the NAP tests, you will fail.
I'm surprised that I was expecting Prof to be doing the marking, but the administrator is doing the marking here. It shows the diversity of experience that's being portrayed here. So, Prof,
yes,
in broader perspective, what would you say are the negative consequences of such appointments? You recall that we liken such appointment to the unauthorized route on entering the motorway.
Yes.
So if you can give us some broader perspective about the about it.
I tell you, if you were to go to the Birth and Death head office where this gentleman will be, you would definitely see a lot of confusion. Okay, because the civil servants there would not be at peace. That's one of the things. The other dangers, or if you like, negative outcomes, will be that this individual who is also coming is also going to take a long time. In fact, he too will not be at peace because he knows that people will be suspicious of him. And then it is going to take him a while to get himself into the civil service, to the processes and all of that. But even more dangerous is the fact that a lot of processes would be on standby or would be on standstill for a long time until this individual can bring themselves to an understanding of what is going on, which is usually not when one civil servant leaves and goes to another place. The integration is very seamless. The work processes don't stop. The colleagues are very comfortable because you are one of us, and all of that. And so it keeps the service going as quickly as possible. I should say that the Birth and Death Registry is one of the very, very important civil service agencies. And the data that they collect, the register that they do of the people who are born and of the people who die, give us the data with which we are able to plan. So a holding on to things that happen there is actually a holding on to. We're going to have a budget coming up. How many children are getting born every day and registered has implications for what kind of budget we have, what kind of expenditure we expect, and what kind of outcomes we do. So it may look very, very mundane, and it may look like CLOG is actually fighting for their own interest, but I bet you this is beyond the interest of CLOG as an association, but also that this goes into the core of the service that people need to be able to get. As part of what we do in the university, we look at public sector reforms, and we say that the civil service requires a lot of reform most of the time. And one of the dangers you don't want to expose the civil service to is stagnation. Stagnation in ideas, stagnation in the processes that take place, and all of that. And every day that there's transition that is not properly done because somebody else is jumping out from the political fray into the civil service fray, actually stampedes the process and ensures that the civil service doesn't have the kind of permanence, the kind of continuity that we require of it, and the people in there lose the kind of confidence that they have in the system.
I think we are going to the end of the program, but I want to ask Mr. Mamu again, based on the broad discussions we've had today, what will be your key takeaways? I mean, maybe some point that you think you need to enumerate for the understanding of our viewers.
The first place, they should distinguish between the civil service as one of the public services. The fact that the civil service is a public service institution does not mean that all public service institutions are civil service or come under civil service. The civil service is unique in its functions. The local government service is unique in its functions. So we must distinguish. We shouldn't call, say, Ghana service, things are going on there and nothing happens. So if it is happening in the civil service, if it is happening in the civil service, there are rules and regulations. There are legal instruments, of which the 2017 Supreme Court ruling is part of it. And the interesting thing about it, 2017 Supreme Court ruling, it was not just a ruling, but it also educated both the public and CLOG, and for that matter, the civil and local government services, of what they need to know as far as governance is concerned in this exercise. For example, it was noted that in the district assemblies, the president, before this judgment, was appointing civil servants, local government staff, and some were even appointed as presiding officers. But by this ruling, all those civil servants who were even appointed into such positions were cautioned that they were breaking the law. And those who did not want to resign, the appointments were terminated. So what is happening now is not that we don't understand this ruling, it's that there are acts, you see, to ensure that this neutrality, anonymity, and permanence is respected in the service. On one part, the workers are doing their part, but the employer seems not to take these things seriously. And that is what is bringing the conflict.
So Prof, as your last word, I would want you to look at how the identifiable stakeholders, government, or the politician, the civil servant, the office of the head of civil service, the PSC, all these institutions, all the stakeholders in this quagmire, work together to protect the sanctity of the civil service and ensure the neutrality, the anonymity, and the permanence of the civil service.
Yeah, so I think that CLOG is doing its bit very well. Head of service and chair of Public Services Commission and their commissions should also engage government. Like I said, let's talk to the chief of staff. It's worrying that CLOG is declared a strike, and I understand you are still on strike. Because when that happens, the country grinds to a halt. Civil service is a very important institution. So when we don't have CLOG members, there's a problem. And so I think my appeal will be to CLOG to reconsider its strike action whilst it negotiates with government on this matter. My appeal to the president would be that I think there are several other places that this gentleman could end up with. So to forestall the stalemate, maybe the president should reconsider and move this individual to a non-civil service position elsewhere, so that there can be peace. In future, I think CLOG should, the next time that we are going to have elections, I would propose that CLOG should engage the presidential candidates ahead of their winning power, and to lay bare what the demands of CLOG is, and to get the commitment of the presidential candidates that when we win power, we will leave civil service intact, and that we will not make overtures to the civil service in the manner that will not promote healthy, industrial harmony. For me, that will be the way to go. A strike action has probably communicated to the government that there's displeasure, I think this should actually culminate into a certain sitting down and a certain conversation. And I think if the gentleman got moved, this would end almost immediately. So we should proceed on that basis because we have a country to build. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I draw the curtains down on this morning's exciting discussions, I want to give you a quote from the Supreme Court's ruling, page 20, and that paragraph is number 2. It says that on a true and proper interpretation of the Constitution, a member of the civil service or local government service does not have a right to contest for elections for political party office or hold political party office while still a member of the civil service or local government service. And here is where we draw the curtains down on this morning's educative discussions. Let me thank Mr. Daniel Amamu, astute public servant, currently the Director of Administration of CLOG. Sir, you've been so insightful for this morning's discussion, and we thank you very much for coming. We are hoping that next time when we call you, we're always going to have access to you, because experience, we are told, is the best teacher.
But when you finish, let me ask one.
Then also, I want to thank Professor Justice Baule, Professor of Public Administration and Management, Dean of the University of Ghana Business School. So before I finally draw the curtains down, I want to listen to the question of Mr. Amamu.
Oh, I just wanted to find out whether you brought your Ghana card here.
Yes, I have it in my suitcase.
Suitcase?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yes, I have mine in my wallet.
But I don't think you have a Ghana card. The card you have is not a Ghana card.
An ECOWAS card.
So why call ECOWAS card Ghana card? That is another thing we can talk about.
Wow, that's a very tough
but me too, before I go, once I am here, I am of CLOG,
okay,
and of the public services in general.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I am still the dean of the business school.
Yeah.
Those who want to study, please come to the University of Ghana Business School.
Yeah, I think it's very appropriate because for the kind of work we do,
yes,
and the kind of knowledge he shares, that's the appropriate place for us. And yes, I'm sure if you get in touch with him, by virtue of this relationship, he would give you a good discount.
Yes. We'll give them a very good payment plan.
A good payment plan.
We won't bite them hard. Thank you.
So thank you very much for coming. We also want to thank the crew of CLOG TV. We want to thank the Executive Secretary, members of the National Executive Council of CLOG for the wonderful thing we see here. The CLOG TV has the ambition and the objective of going and delving beyond policies. And that is one of the programs that we brought to you, restarting the civil service. Until we meet again next time, we wish you a very blessed day. This is your host, Cephas and Dosu, bringing you this production from the studio of CLOG TV. Thank you for having us.